Everybody, next up here on the Weekend Blitz, I am joined by our great managing editor over at Last Word on College Football. I got to get them brownie points in somehow, Tony. Tony Siracusa is with me here today. Talking more ACC here in the first hour, Tony. It's always great to see you and talk to you.
Look, I'm happy you got a show back. I'm happy you're doing it on Saturday mornings. Saturday mornings are built for college football, so I think the timing is great, and I'm excited about you doing a new show.
I thank you, Tony. Thank you. It's exciting, nervous, all at the exact same time
It's
as always.
supposed to be. Yep.
You always want that first one to go really, really smoothly. So that's the important part. First impressions and all.
There you go. There you go.
When I asked you to come on, it was
Mm-hmm.
what last week. I messaged
Second
you
thing.
and I said, "Let's talk ACC. I know you'd be there at ACC."
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think we'd lead with the Pac-12 though in our conversation. Your old stopping grounds,
It is.
but
It is.
I saw I get Bleacher Report 2 news to my email. And I
Okay.
believe their headline this morning, I read my email. It says, "Is the Pac-12 screwed?" And I think that kind of seems like they are doomed. I'll use that word. They're doomed. What's what's up with the Pac-12?
Well, like you said, just as a reference point, it is my old stomping ground. I spent 5 years covering UCLA and the Pac-12, and I think, if I had given Chip Kelly a heads up that I was moving to Charlotte, he probably would have helped me pack. I'm sure he was eager for me to leave and get out of his hair. Um, Look, the Pac-12 has two main issues right now. First one is the ghost of Larry Scott, the previous commissioner, who left things in just a horrible state when he retired, resigned, was pushed out the door. Take your pick. When his contract was up, there was no chance of an offer to stay any longer. Larry Scott was horrible with media negotiations. So they were stuck with the Pac 12 network, which is not carried on DirecTV or any AT&T outlet. So you miss 2/3 of the West Coast potential viewers. So that hamstrung the conference in terms of the money that they were giving back to the schools. Um, and the Pac-12 network is likely 99% going away next year. It will be eliminated. The new commissioner, George Kliavkoff, not a fan of the product because it's too hard to monetize. And so they will work on the production front of whatever streaming service the Pac-12 brings in as part of the new TV deal. Then you bring in George Kliavkoff, who came from MGM Resorts and had negotiated media contracts and sponsorship contracts and all of these things. The first thing, and he's been there a little over 2 years now, the first priority had to be getting that new TV deal done because their TV deal expires in June of 2024. So at the end of the upcoming academic year. And look, you got to believe he's been working on it, but there is nothing there. We're now in July. We're almost at the end of July, as I have to check my date. We're almost at the end of July, and there's still nothing. The presidents and chancellors of the universities, basically what he refers to as his CEO group, have been telling him since March, you got to get it done by end of April. And they've been trying to kind of toe the company line, say, yeah, we're confident. It's coming soon. It's coming soon. April went by, May went by. Again, we're now end of July, and he's got nothing. In the interim, a year ago, June, he, of course, was dealt the huge blow, which he did not see coming, which was the departure of USC and UCLA. That negatively impacted any of the media negotiations because you just lost the number 2 media market in the entire country.
Mhm.
And I know fans in other parts of the country will kind of take some shots, UCLA football, whatever, USC, fine. It's the media market. It is the number 2 media market in the entire country. Your entire conference was just devalued from a media rights negotiation standpoint. So he had to, and he did not see it coming. Frankly, nobody did. I mean, it was a shocker. I will tell you, I was out running some errands that day. I figured it's June. I got a little time to myself, right? I mean, we're not in conference media days yet. And my phone starts pinging and people telling me this is coming. You're not going to believe what I just heard. And people, sources that I have from within the conference. And, I stopped what I was doing, jumped in my car, ran home, and there it was. But like I said, a huge blow to the media negotiations. Since then, there's been no recovery. There is nothing else that has come. There have been inklings that ESPN has said thank you, but no thanks in terms of being the tier one media partner. Fox has done the same. You have a tier two media partner for the year in the Pac-12 network. You need a tier three in reality, which logic says it'll be a streaming network, much like what the NFL did. Maybe it's Amazon, maybe it's Apple. But because those entities have never done college football, they need more time to kind of kick the tires and see how this all works and that it's different from the NFL product. And so it takes a lot more time. You fast forward, actually, let me digress for 30 seconds. There have been all these reports from West Coast reporters that have been like, Pac-12 is fine. Yeah, it's down to 10 schools, but they're going to stay together. They're all going to sign a grant of rights deal that Kliavkoff wants. It says they won't leave for 4 or 5 years or whatever the new TV deal will be. And so there were leaks, but they were leaks in the wrong direction. These few media guys were talking to the wrong sources and they were being misled for the purposes of a little bit of conference propaganda almost. So you fast forward to Pac-12 Media Day last Friday, and Kliavkoff just bombed, absolutely bombed. There was no new TV deal yet to announce. All the media is there, and that's all they want to talk about. Yeah, it's fine. We'll talk to the coaches and the players, but let's talk about why you don't have a media deal. It was okay that he didn't have one yet, but he needed to have something to announce, even if it was, look, we're close. We're not ready yet, but we're close. The lawyers are looking at it. We're dotting I's, crossing T's, whatever. He had nothing. His answer to the question was, because a reporter from the Oregonian asked him about, where are we with this? And his answer was, we're not discussing the new TV deal today because we want the focus to be on football. You roll along for 10 minutes and someone finally thinks to follow up. Wait a second. Does that mean you have a TV deal and you're just not announcing it? And the answer was no, you're reading too much into this. The reason they didn't announce it is because there was nothing to announce. And by playing this kind of cat and mouse game, it was horrible. Now, let me tell you what we found out within minutes of that happening is Colorado athletic director Rick George got up and left Pac-12 Media Day. He went to the airport, hopped on their private jet, and went back to Boulder early. He was supposed to stay through the rest of the day, maybe even into set. He left. He was pissed off, and he left. And now you fast forward, and Colorado is out the door. They are headed back to the Big 12. The announcement has been made. A vote from the Board of Regents was taken, and the proposal was agreed to unanimously. There were geeks like me who were actually streaming the Board of Regents meeting. Thank goodness for Colorado tax dollars being well spent that they put the meeting up on streaming. And they all talked about, it was a shame. They really wanted to stay with the Pac-12, but they got to look out for their future. And you can't have a future when you don't know what's next. You have to have some sense of what's next. Colorado's not going to be the last one to leave. I mean, he's got a few weeks, maybe, to get something put together, or there will be at least one more. We've gone back and forth with our sources this week, and even while I was at ACC Media Days in Charlotte, and there will be at least one more. He's got about 2 weeks to fix this, or someone else is out the door.
When I look at this, Tony, and I look at the Big 12, and I look at two conferences that were basically, in a way, in the same position. I mean, they lose Oklahoma and Texas. I mean, look, the teams they have in the Big 12, they're great. I think it's going to be a fun conference when Texas and Oklahoma are gone. But look, it's Texas and Oklahoma.
Right.
That's your two bell cows. That's your two money makers. And then, and then now you look at, like you said, with the Pac-12 losing UCLA and USC losing that. And now we've seen two commissioners kind of like go in two different directions with this.
Right.
Brett Yarmark has pretty much taken this, and I mean, he's almost putting a nail in the coffin of the Pac-12 potentially. And then you look at George Kliavkoff, he's fumbled it. It's like two conferences, same position, going opposite directions.
Well, and here's the irony is when the Big 12 lost their two premier universities, then the Big 12 and Brent Bowlesby, who was the commissioner then, and Kliavkoff were talking about, hey, maybe we need to kind of have a merge of interest. Maybe we need to talk about scheduling a lot of each other, kind of saving each other. And the Pac-12 said no, because the Big 12 schools did not fit the academic footprint of the Pac-12. The Pac-12, for those who don't know, requires that you be a Carnegie Education Tier 1 research university to qualify to get into the conference. I think there are two schools who are grandfathered out of that if they ever slip, Washington State and Oregon, because they were both founding members of the conference. So they get grandfathered in. They both qualify anyway. But this is the reason why they took Utah instead of BYU years ago. It was because BYU was not a Tier 1 Carnegie education school. Most of the Big 12 schools at the time were not. So Pac-12 kind of thumbed their nose at them. Yormark is getting the last laugh right now. He issued a statement, which they put out on social media on the Big 12 letterhead, and it just said, Commissioner Brett Yormark comments on the University of Colorado, and all it said was, quote, they're back. And that was it. And they issued that. He's having a pretty good laugh right now. And you're right. Two conferences that really had similar issues. But, look, Yormark was quick to at least get a contract extension on the media rights deal while they were negotiating a new one. Kliavkoff didn't do that. He's behind the eight ball by a lot right now.
So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be worth keeping an eye on as we get on. So, and then the ACC, let's jump at ACC. They stole the CW from the Pac-12. So there you go on that.
Yeah. Well, but here's the thing with that, and there is a significant difference that I think needs to be pointed out, is the ACC, because there was talk about the Pac-12 getting on CW, and certainly I was quick to laugh about it, saying, great, they'll, show Washington State versus Arizona after a special rerun of Gilmore Girls, or whatever else the CW. I don't want your audience thinking I'm that familiar with programming on the CW, but I had to look it up. And, the difference is with the ACC is the ACC has its Tier 1 partner, ESPN. Mm-hmm. They have their Tier 2 partner, the ACC Network, which is owned by ESPN. They needed a Tier 3 because Raycom owns the Tier 3 rights. And Raycom was putting them on with the regional sports network, in this case, which was the Bally Sports Network, which is actually currently in bankruptcy and is going to go away before the end of the year. They needed to secure something else. And the CW, I guess during the summer showed a couple of live golf tournaments. And so, now they have some sports background, I suppose. But they're going to show, I think it's 9 or 10 games throughout the course of the year. They're not going to be the high-level game. They're going to be the games you put on your Tier 3 last-level partner. But the ACC was already wrapped up with everything, and this was really just Raycom saying, we need a new distribution point. Pac-12's got nothing, for starting next year. So they're starting from scratch.
So I'm a little bit, outside of the football and sports stuff. I pay attention to a lot of movie and TV stuff. Mm-hmm. So the CW is a network that used to have a bunch of superhero shows and everything else, but they cost a lot of money. Those TV shows cost a lot of money. So they've got some new ownership over at the CW. Someone new's running the company, and they want to bring back costs. Well, if Raycom is if they're doing everything, they just have to put it on their
Yeah,
air.
that's
That's a
it.
money saving possibility for the
Absolutely.
CW. Probably
Absolutely.
Live Golf probably did the same thing. It was probably them doing the production. They're just
Right.
putting it on their air.
Yeah, you're getting a cut of the ad revenue that comes in. You're getting paid as the distributor, and Raycom is doing all the production and carrying all the heavy load for it. So it's very beneficial for the CW. I have no idea about their superhero background. It's good to know. So it really is turnkey, and I have discovered in my office here that it is easier to find the CW than it ever was the Bally Sports networks. Those things were a nightmare to find, and just to look for a tier 3 game. So this will work out for everybody. For the ACC, for the Pac-12, they don't have a tier 1 or tier 2 starting in 2024.
Oh, so ACC kickoff. I want to get out right, Tony, because I know the ACC is a little bit different. They don't call it media days. They like to call it the ACC kickoff. We all know what it is. But, with the whole week, what we always look at these media days, the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, all of them. What's the storyline? We feel like there's always a general talking point, the coaches, commissioner. What for you being there all week? What's kind of been like that storyline, the main thing that coaches and the commissioner and everybody's been talking about?
Well, when you get to the commissioner and you get to Jim Phillips, his name is in the news a lot right now. There were a lot of things he couldn't talk about. He is a named defendant in the Northwestern lawsuit because he was the athletic director there from 2018 to 2021. So some of these allegations that go beyond football and into the baseball team and the volleyball team and whatever allegedly occurred under his watch as athletic director. So first thing out of his mouth on Tuesday was, "I can't talk about it." I reject all the allegations, and beyond that, I can't talk about it. I would say that Phillips, for his part, his tone really followed a lot of what Greg Sankey did with the SEC, even what Kleofkoff did with the Pac-12, Yormark with the Big 12, is talk about NIL, the portal a little bit less, but collectives and the NIL. Because you and I have talked about this, I do not put collectives and NIL in the same sentence. NIL in its purest form is a sponsor paying your quarterback to go sign autographs or be a part of his automotive commercial or whatever, in that direct relationship. The collective is money bundling. It's legalized money laundering. Frankly, they just take the donations from wherever they get them. They're not earmarked for anything in particular, and you're paying players to suit up and play. It's different than what the intentions of NIL were. Anyway, this was a big part of the conversation for Phillips. There is a lot of activity within Washington, D.C., coming up with different bills and different legislation. And I think when you talk to a lot of reporters 5, 6, 7 months ago, they were talking about there's no way. Congress has got no appetite for this. Turns out Congress does. There are 3 bills in draft form right now and another 2 ready to go to subcommittees. The focus of them is that right now there are 38 states that have their own legislation. All of them are different from each other, but they all have the same theme. Our schools can give the middle finger to the NCAA. Don't worry about following the NCAA rules. You follow the state legislation and you're fine. They've basically neutered the NCAA, which had done a good enough job of neutering itself, frankly, for the years coming up to this by not tackling this issue years ago. And putting in some guardrails a long time ago when they had the chance. But these states are now basically saying, we're running ourselves, we're running our schools, and this state is running its schools, and so on. There is a desire with all the commissioners to have one national plan. And the only way to do it is to protect the NCAA from lawsuits, because if the NCAA tries to run over the states, they're going to be sued. And they don't have tax exempt status in any way. So they will be sued. So this is the only other way to come up with a national plan to either empower the NCAA via Congress to do this, or Congress does it itself. You hear a lot of interesting takes from the coaches on it. The coaches want these fixes also. It is ironic when you go through the ACC, there is only one state in the school or in the conference footprint that has no legislation. Boston College is not covered by anything because the state of Massachusetts has no NIL legislation. But North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, so on and so forth, Pennsylvania, they all do. There's a feeling that there is a lot of inequities and imbalance because the states are operating, unto themselves. There is a thought process, which I brought up today with one of the coaches, which will, Last Word on College Football will be covering in more detail next week, is there is one other thing that I would think is in the NCAA's arsenal, and that is membership to the NCAA is voluntary. It's also a two-way street. The agreement says you will follow the NCAA rules, and in exchange, you will be a member and you will get revenue sharing. The NCAA doesn't control Division I college football, but it does March Madness and, the College World Series and the softball, all those other revenue sports. Let one of the universities violate the NCAA rules because they're following the state, and then kick the school out of the NCAA. That is a weapon that the NCAA likely does have at its disposal. It's a huge weapon, and you got to be careful using it. But let's just say, I don't know, pick a school, Texas Tech, right? Violates it, because you're not going to kick Texas out because that's too big. You're going to pick on a smaller school, suspend their NCAA privileges. Doesn't impact football, but it cuts them out of participating in the NCAA tournaments, the postseason tournaments. Takes away their revenue from it. So now you're damaging the conference as well, and you're getting the conference commissioners to have to take an even stronger position. It is a distinct possibility that could happen somewhere down the road if big picture legislation doesn't work.
Right. I know. Reading the tweets and stuff from our Twitter account, it seemed like NIL. NIL was the.
It was. It absolutely was. Look, it's because you have some coaches who talk about the NIL is impacting the transfer portal because kids are getting promises allegedly from other schools or the collectives, and the collectives are obviously run by the boosters. Go in the portal, transfer out of where you are, go in the portal, and then come over here and you'll get this. There are coaches who claim to have proof that proof that they say they've turned over to congressional representatives as they're working on these bills, that these kids are getting these promises and then the promises are not being fulfilled on the other end. That also gets you to tampering, which is against NCAA rules. But the NCAA is hamstrung right now. They know if they try and enforce anything with regards to NIL, they're going to get sued. So they just sit back and do nothing. Dave Clawson from Wake Forest today said he had 6 to 8 players who were the subjects of tampering during the off season. Wouldn't tell us who they were, of course. And of course, he wouldn't name who did it. There were a couple of us who tried to pin him down, and his answer was it was nobody within the ACC. It was a large budget university and this is his quote, a repeat offender. I think everyone's going to assume it was someone in the SEC because they've got the bigger budgets. But Mac Brown has made the same allegations. Some of his players, including Drake May, his quarterback, been the subjects of tampering. Look, if you're not going to turn these schools into the NCAA, then nothing's going to happen. It's just going to keep going. And you can see the frustration in our Q&A with Clausen. He said, no, I agree. I'm not convinced anything will happen. I'm at the point where I say, you know what, let's just forget all the rules. Let's just make it even, and there are no rules with regards to recruiting, money, the portal. Just drop all the rules and let's just all let it fly. Now, he doesn't really mean that. He doesn't really want that. But I think it's a frustration point that a lot of coaches have come to.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Clausen because I was going to now transition into Wake Forest for the upcoming season. Would a not a transition year, but a team that kind of is in transition because Sam Hartman not being there. I mean, I feel like he was a 10-year senior there at Wake Forest.
It felt like it.
As long as he's been there, just one of those guys that feel like he's been there forever. Record rate going to Notre Dame. Mitch Griffith coming in, a guy with experience. Started the first game against VMI last year, was 21-29, 288, 3 touchdowns. But for people who don't know, what has Clausen said about him, and what did you see in his one time of action last year?
Well, I think there are a couple things. One, yeah, I agree. It seemed like Hartman was there forever. It felt like he was. And Hartman was a challenge from the media standpoint for us to deal with. He was rarely available to the media. He had an agreement. He wouldn't talk to us during the week after practice or anything. So just post game. And then when Wake Forest went on a 3-game losing streak last year, he was amazingly unavailable for each of those post-game press conferences. Then when he, for the Gasparilla Bowl, where they played Missouri in one of the pre-Christmas bowl games, I asked him literally at the end of the press conference, we all had gotten the word that day that he was not going to the NFL. He was going to go to Notre Dame. It came out pre-game. And we were holding on to it until we talked to him. And I asked him, I said, what is your process for deciding what's next? Talk to your family, take some time off. He literally got up out of his seat and was running off the stage and said, my thought process is I'm going to whoever has the best drinks tonight. And he left. That was it. That was our Sam Hartman time. Mitch Griffiths is a different kind of dude. He really is. He's not going to overwhelm anybody with his physical skill. They say he's 6 foot tall. He's not, because he comes up to my eyes and I'm not 6 foot tall. So maybe in his spikes on his tippy toes, he's 6 foot tall. He's really 5'10" and a half, maybe 5'11". This is his 3rd year there. So he's been waiting. He has waited. When I talked to him during the Wake Forest part of ACC media days, we talked to him about what kind of vote of confidence did you feel you were getting from Clausen when he didn't go to the portal to look for another quarterback. There have been a lot of quarterback changes around the country and even within the ACC. Did you feel good that Clausen wasn't out shopping for somebody else? Because Clausen said right after spring, Mitch is our quarterback. And he said that Clausen had told him in the spring, I'm not going to look for anybody else. This is your offense to run. So he did have the one game last year as a starter against VMI when Sam had an emergency life-saving surgery. And he played well. He played fine. You had the stats there and he did well, but it was VMI. Let's not get too crazy about this. If you haven't seen the Wake Forest offense, it's different. Now, it gets mischaracterized also. There is a part of the offense which is referred to as the slow mesh offense. And if you watch them on TV, the announcers will get overwhelmed talking about the slow mesh. If you come to Last Word on college football, you get the reality of it, which is they run the slow mesh about 25% of the time. The rest of it is a pretty typical RPO offense. But that slow mesh literally has the quarterback and the running back walking up to the line of scrimmage after the snap, with the quarterback literally putting the ball in the running back's gut, forcing the linebackers to either come up and play the run, in which case he'll pull the ball and throw it to a receiver that's gotten behind the linebackers, or if the linebackers drop off, he slaps the running back on the back, which is the key. It's your ball, go, right? it worked with Sam because Sam was taller, he was bigger, stronger arm, and he had an over-the-top throwing motion. Griffiths comes at it with a 3/4 angle throwing motion. Now, think about it. You're already right in the faces of the defensive line. You're 5'10" with a 3/4 motion. You're going to have to make a lot of adjustments to that slow mesh offense, because otherwise you're going to have to count on your offensive lineman putting the defensive line down on the ground on every play, which just doesn't happen. So I think one of the biggest changes this new quarterback situation is going to create is you're going to see them roll out of the pocket a lot more than what they did with Hartman. Hartman was not fleet of foot. The coaching staff would convince us, oh, no, remember, he had that 25-yard run against Louisville. Great. That was one. What else you got? Griffiths is a little quicker, a little more fleet of foot. I think you'll see him throw on the run and roll him out of the pocket a lot more than what we're used to seeing with Wake Forest the last 3 or 4 years.
So interesting. I always enjoy watching them play that style of offense. And Tony, when we did this, I said 20 minutes. We fit over 30 minutes. So hey, it's fine. It's fine.
I can sit here and talk college football for the next 3 hours. So
yeah. So ACC kickoff. So
yes.
it seems like, okay, everybody's talking about Florida State and Clemson. That's the top two teams there.
Yes.
So this is kind of like a double, a two-part question. I know you're not supposed to do that, but it's a two-part question for you.
Go right ahead.
One, how do you see that playing out? Who do you see being the ACC champion in the year? Remember, I'm 90 minutes away from Tallahassee, so that it would feel good to me if you say Florida State.
Influence me.
And also, if there was a third team, who is it? I mean, I think people think North Carolina just because of Drake May, but those two questions, how do you see both those?
I do think, well, and important caveat here as I answer this, remember, this is the first year where there's no divisions in the ACC. So it is the top two teams that will play for the championship. There's no longer an Atlantic and a Coastal division. Now, that having been said, the top two teams are Clemson and Florida State. They just are. I'm going to say this, that as we record this, I have not yet submitted my ballot as a voter for the ACC pecking order of how I think, the teams will finish. I have until like midday Sunday to do that. And I'm going to take as much time as I darn well want. But they are the two best teams. This is a quarterback heavy conference. And I think you look at, Jordan Travis at Florida State, and he's one of the top two quarterbacks in the conference to me. You look at that defense, and it's a very good defense. You got Jared Verse, can dominate an offensive line. And so you like that team a lot. With Clemson has a lot of potential. They are the best team in the conference, and so usually you don't talk potential. They need to show up with a better offense than what they've shown in the past couple of years. And they went out and got Garrett Riley, the offensive coordinator from TCU and Lincoln Riley's brother, as their new offensive coordinator. They'll have Cade Klubnik. Clemson fans have been waiting. They were clamoring last year to see Cade Klubnik. They were done with DJ Uiagalelei, who, by the way, I think is going to have a really good season at Oregon State. I think he's going to love running their offense in Corvallis. Jonathan Smith is doing great things up there. Anyway, back to Clemson. The defense is really good. They need much, much more production out of that offense. They need a more creative offense. They've got Will Shipley, who to me is probably the best player in the ACC. The kid's just dynamic as a running back, catching the ball out of the backfield, a special teams player. I think he's the best overall player in the conference. There are better players at their position, but overall, for all the different things he can do, I think he's the best player in the conference. So I do think at the end of it, it comes down to those two. If there is a third team, I'm going to say it's a long drop off from number 1 and 2 down to the next bunch. There's a significant gap. I would say it's probably North Carolina, and it's because of Drake May, who is going to get a lot of Heisman attention early on. Now, that having been said, there are big adjustments in the offense. Their offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, left to take the same job at Wisconsin. He's longtime friends with Luke Fickell, and so he went to Wisconsin. And that defense has a lot of work to do. I'm still puzzled as to what Gene Chizik is doing with that defense, and I know a lot of Carolina fans share my concerns. We're going to see a lot about them in week 1. They play South Carolina at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, and if you know about Carolina fans, you know that that's going to be predominantly a South Carolina crowd at that game. Charlotte's closer, to South Carolina than it is to Chapel Hill, but that's just also the way those two teams show out. The South Carolina fans travel better. So I think we're going to see a lot about them. The defense, a lot of questions. I think we're going to like watching Duke. I got to tell you, Mike Elko just got a new contract extension, well-deserved. People need to check in their quarterback, Riley Leonard. This kid is really, really good because he plays at Duke, because he plays in the ACC, because he was a redshirt freshman last year. Not many people really caught on to his game. Strong arm, can throw downfield, can take off running for significant yards. I really like watching this kid play. However, Duke has got a really tough schedule. So they can look really good and even improved over last year and only win 6 games and barely make bowl eligibility because of their schedule. It's a good team. I really got to tell your audience, check out Duke when they're on. You're going to like watching Riley Leonard. But I think I'm not sold, by the way, for everyone wondering about the U. I am absolutely not sold on Mario Cristobal's turnaround in Miami. I am absolutely not sold. He's a good coach, a decent recruiter, and I think he needs another 2 years before that program is a championship contender in the conference.
You brought up Duke, and I will close it up on this. When I talked to Eric McLean a few months ago, and I asked him basically the same question, and he brought up Duke. And actually, he said Duke before North Carolina, which
that's fair.
So I mean, there's a lot of people that cover the conference that are liking Duke. So everybody watch Duke. And
absolutely,
Tony, it's been fun. Like I said, we playing 20. We win about 38 here. So it's all good. It's all good. Podcast world. Hey, podcasting, YouTubing. I'm not on the radio. I don't have to worry about a break. I don't have that producer going.
You're running your own clock.
That's it. Go as long as you want. But anyways, it's been fun talking ACC, Pac-12 unexpectedly, but it's been fun talking all this stuff, college football with you. Where can the viewers and listeners check you out if they want to follow you online?
Well, they can check us out and your written work, of course, as well at Last Word on Sports .com, and you go to that college football button, and there is all of our work. As you know, we have, while a lot of digital media sites have shrunk and come under misfortune, we have expanded, and we have the largest team that we've ever had. We've got 30 writers spread out across the country, really talented writers covering teams all across the country. We've got a Facebook page. We've got an Instagram page. They can find us on Twitter at Last Word on CFB. And if they feel like arguing with me, because you've seen my Twitter feed, I basically don't shy away from argument. Matter of fact, I tend to start some. They can find me at Tony Bruin on Twitter. When I moved to Charlotte and started covering Wake Forest, I did not change my handle to Demon Deacon Tony or whatever. Tony Bruin on Twitter.
Or it's X now, Tony.
On the X. It's whatever. The Bird. Well, they used to be Bird app. How's that?
Oh yeah. Everybody go do that. And again, Tony, it's been a lot of fun, and I hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
Absolutely. Call me anytime, man.